It's a beautiful day here in the Northeast. As some of you are probably saying, have you looked outside? It is probably shower, like flurrying. And I'm like, yeah, I would love for it to be warmer and sunnier so that I could wear my flip flops because I am definitely a flip flop girl. But hey, I'm alive. It's all good. We're alive. We were able to have another day here on planet Earth. So, good morning, Susan. Good morning, Valerie. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Roxanne. So, it is gorgeous. It's going to be another gorgeous day. It's all about mindset, guys. It's about mindset. When we're grateful that God has given us another day, it doesn't matter if it's raining, if it's snowing, whatever is happening outside, we are grateful. We meet the day with a great attitude. So, good morning, Heidi. Good morning, Waleska. Good morning, Dorothy. Um, I got to tell you, man, the more I study about the woman with the issue of blood. I'm sorry, the woman at the wall. I got to tell you. Good morning, Garrett. Um, um, I got to tell you that the woman with the issue of blood is one of my absolute favorite characters in the Bible, and I'm hoping that one day I can um, write about her, to actually do a novel about her. She like fascinates me. Good morning, Teresa. So let's get going. We're going to start. Okay, so we're up to John chapter 4, and we're going to start with verse 13. It says, Jesus answered, if you drink from Jacob's well, you'll be thirsty again and again. Drinks the living water, but if anyone drinks the living water I give them, they will never thirst again and will be forever satisfied. But when you drink the water I give you, it becomes a gushing fountain of the Holy Spirit, springing up and flooding up with endless life. And the woman replied, let me drink the water so I'll never be thirsty again and won't have to come back here to draw water. Now, I imagined her quite honestly with Tude, right? And she was probably saying to herself, okay, I'll entertain him because, he's here. Maybe he wants something from me. It's obvious that I am this type of woman because I'm out in the middle of the day when it's the hottest and I'm drawing water. I'm by myself. I'm not accompanied with other women or with a kinsman. So he obviously knows what I am. And I got to tell you, it was so cool because you might not know who she truly is. How many times there have been preachings about this woman and they talk about her in such a way to make a spiritual point. But we're going to get into that in just a moment. What I loved is that you start to see in the book of John a pattern of how God uses or Jesus uses the physical to explain something spiritual. So if you look at the physical of being thirsty, and again, I told you that it's really cool to see that they're explaining Jesus and his humanity, because sometimes people think that, Jesus was this superhuman and he didn't need certain things. And they showed, that he was tired. They showed that he was thirsty. So thirsty is a normal biological need. It's not only a biological need, it's a biological need that keeps you alive. It keeps you alive because there's different biological needs in us as humans, but this one keeps you alive. It affects the brain, it affects the kidneys. If you don't have enough of it, it can mess you up in the brain, and it could shut down your kidneys if you don't have water. It's a necessity to live. So Jesus explains in this verse, right, that he's bringing something that is a necessity to you, a necessity for your spiritual life. And he says, but if anyone drinks of the living water I give them, they will never thirst again, and they will be forever satisfied. So there's a need in us, a spiritual need in us that can only come from Jesus through Holy Spirit. And that's amazing, right? And I'm sure that when he was talking to her, maybe that just went right over her head and just like, okay, yeah, all right. It might, but he knew John was going to put this in what we call a Bible today, and that we would be reading this, and that these little nuggets, these little gems that are hidden within the Gospels, someone like me and others, right? Countless others in the past would be reading this and say, wow, this is a magnificent truth that Jesus was trying to explain to this woman, right? And she missed it just for a hot moment, because I'm sure she asked him later on, well, what did you mean at the well? Can you explain that? And we'll get there, right? Remember, we're doing this with our thinking cap. Now she said, let me drink that water so I'll never be thirsty again and won't come back here to draw water. Now, mind you, she used what he used as an example, right? An analogy, right? Or what was it that they call an allegory? She used that as the physical. So that's how I'm telling you, it went right over her head. If I don't have to come out here, during the hot, scorching sun and deal with people like you, tell me where I can get that water, because I don't want to do this in the middle of the day. Because obviously, I can't go during the mornings when normal people go. So she probably still had to, or she was just entertaining whatever he was saying. And then Jesus, he kind of like does the shocker thing. And he goes in verse 16, Jesus said, go get your husband and bring him back here. And she said, but I'm not married, the woman answered. That's true, Jesus said, but you've been married 5 times and now you're living with a man who's not your husband. You have told the truth. So she had nothing to hide, because at that point she was marginalized. But sometimes we look at her, we really don't know who she was. So I want to give you a little bit of background on her situation, right? So let's think about this. We already know that she was marginalized because she had 5 husbands, right? He says, you've been married 5 times, and now the man you're living with is not your husband. So that was number 6, right? And I find it interesting that she didn't deny it. Yep, that's me. But so she was marginalized because she had multiple husbands. She was also marginalized because she was a woman at that time. And not every single woman was marginalized at that time. There were women that were born into money. They were born in they were born into nobility. They were born into the priesthood. There were certain women that were born, into certain class where they weren't demeanored. But if you didn't have those opportunities, if you weren't born into, into wealth, if you were married, for example, and you got divorced or your husband died and there was no kinsman to take over your care, you were in a bad position, because there wasn't a lot of jobs out there for you to um, go out and make a living, for you to be able to assign forms and say, okay, the government is going to take care of me. So you were in a bad predicament in those days. So, also remember, and people forget this, that area was under Roman rulership. And so people think that it's like, living here in our country where we're free, we have certain freedoms and we have certain benefits and all that stuff. They were considered slaves. So, there was, if you were born free, okay? So if you were, let's say you were, so let's go back a little. So there were two categories. You were born free or you were a free slave. So if you were considered a free slave, you couldn't get married. If you were a freed slave, meaning that you were in slavery before, you couldn't get married because in the Roman Empire, you were not recognized as a free citizen. Okay, so there were also different classes within the Roman Empire, as far as your citizenship or who you were within the Roman Empire. So you were a free person when you were in the Roman Empire during that time as a Samaritan or an Israelite. So if you were born free, then you were allowed to get married. They recognized your marriage. Also, you have to remember during those times, maybe she was part of somebody's concubine and he upped and died. And if he did, guess what? You were not considered anything valuable. You were less than valuable. So there's so many things that could have been happening in her life. Maybe she went through five husbands because they kept dying on her. Remember that they were under Roman rulership, and basically you were killed for a lot of different reasons, especially if they wanted to make an example of you. We talked about this a few weeks ago, how when they were going into Jerusalem, they used to have crosses right, through that road. There were hundreds of crosses. You would see people that were crucified constantly. So maybe what you think is not what she really was. Maybe what you think wasn't who she really was. Maybe she went through hard times. Maybe she was a prostitute. Okay, that's another thing. Remember, we're going to read this with our thinking caps. Maybe she was a prostitute and she saw Jesus at the well, and said, okay, here's my next customer. Maybe the person that she was living with, that's not her husband, was her pimp. None of us really know, right? Maybe she was in a really bad situation where she was saying, okay, here goes another man. He's at the well because he knows that I come here. Or he's at the well and he knows that a woman that's coming along by herself, that she's here not because she's, a stellar woman, because she's been marginalized, because she is a prostitute. So I'll just talk to him and listen to him, and maybe, I'll get some money out of him. Maybe that was her attitude. We don't know. But the beautiful thing about it, if you really look at it, was that Jesus knew all these things, and yet he kept talking to her and he introduced to her a spiritual truth, saying, hey, I know that you're empty inside. I know that you're looking for something spiritual. I know that you need a change in your life. And sometimes we look at people and we don't know what they're going through. We don't know, the struggle that they're going through, what they've been going through, why they made the bad choices that they made. And Jesus wasn't deterred about that. Jesus just continued to tell her, and have conversation with her. And tomorrow, we're going to look at, how Jesus continues to talk with her and how a change starts to happen within her. I love it because when you look at this, she was robbed of her identity. She was marginalized. She was probably called all sorts of things by people that should have been lifting her up, her fellow women. And they did it. They marginalized her to the extent that she had to go get water in the middle of the day. And that's a lesson in itself. So we're going to continue um, with verse 19 tomorrow. But this is, I don't know about you guys, but I get excited when I start to see that the God of the universe, in Jesus came to a woman that was jacked up as far as identity, how she thought about herself, how others thought about herself, but about her. He came to somebody like her in a territory where he was not welcome because of his background. He didn't care, was not deterred because he saw her need. He met her where he was at. That should be like mind blowing to you, just to really really look at that and say, wow, Jesus really, really loved. Okay, we went over. I know. I'm going to say good morning to the rest of you, and then we got to go. So, and I think I said good morning, Teresa. Good morning, Caroline. Good morning, Marina. Good morning, Sue. Good morning, Jamie. Good morning, Jessica. So, and you're so true, Carolyn. We're going to talk about that. You know, she was walking in shame. We could keep going. I got to tell you, we could keep going. There's so much beautiful material here. So we will be here at the same bat time, same bat channel, 7:30 a.m. devotional. I'll see you here. Remember, these are also live in YouTube in case you cannot reach Facebook or you have friends that cannot reach Facebook because they don't have a Facebook account. They can also see this live in YouTube. God bless. Have a fantabulous day, guys. Love you.